Welcome back to Flashpoint. Last week, our two guests went to Pittsburgh for Charlotte Regional Business Alliance's intercity trip. Explain why is a trip like this important for you guys to do?
Yeah, I mean, every year, last year we went to Atlanta, this year Pittsburgh. It takes the top, elected officials, business leaders, philanthropic folks in town, and puts them all together to see and learn from what's happening in another city. I immediately thought on this trip, I don't know what our takeaway is going to be, but one thing jumped out at me was, in the mid-'80s, they experienced that collapse of the steel industry, and they're still trying to recover from that concentration of industry. It just made me realize how important the work we're doing to not just diversify our economy here using tech, fintech, things of that nature, but to make sure that we're prepared, because the financial industry is going through a big transformation right now, too.
Yeah. Anything you want to add? You agree?
Yeah, no, it was a great trip. Pittsburgh's actually one of the top cities on that economic mobility study, where we were at the bottom that people have talked about for so long. And so I think any other major city, there's things we can go and learn as far as best practices and things where maybe they've stumbled, and we would want to avoid that as we continue to grow.
All right, switching gears now. This week, former state senator Cunningham announced he is switching races. He's no longer going to run for lieutenant governor, but instead he's going to run for Senate to unseat Senator Tillis. Cunningham is a familiar name in a lot of state Democratic circles. This is a video of him voting back in 2010 when he ran for Senate at that time. He lost in the primary, though. In the primary, Cunningham will face Mecklenburg County Commissioner Trevor Fuller, State Senator Erica Smith, and former State Senator Eric Mansfield, expected to announce as well. State Treasurer Richard Moore says he is considering the race. They're competing to take on Senator Tom Tillis himself. Tillis will face Raleigh businessman Garland Tucker and Sandy Smith of Pitt County in the March 3rd Republican primary. North Carolina's 2020 Senate race widely expected to be one of the most competitive in the country. Some analysts have called Tillis one of the most vulnerable GOP incumbents. Do you think that's true? Is he one of the most vulnerable?
It's hard to tell. I mean, he's got amazing campaign team, and he knows how to raise money. He knows how to run a good campaign.
I think Tillis is going to have a pretty easy time with his primary, but I do think he's going to have a very, very close race in the general election. And there's some great candidates that are already in that race. Cal Cunningham probably has the biggest name ID of the bunch. He's run statewide before. He's already shown that he can raise a boatload of money just in that lieutenant governor's race. The handful of months he was in it, he raised a ton. And I'm kind of glad to see him transition, because we had a lot of really talented folks in that lieutenant governor's race, and only one was going to be able to win. I think the Senate race, people felt like there had not been someone who demonstrated the fundraising ability and the name ID to take on Tillis. I think Cal Cunningham could be that person.
I'll tell you what, there's a lot of good, strong candidates there, but if I was a betting man, I would say having Paul Shoemaker run my campaign, which is Tillis's, that is a game changer, and he's one of the absolute best in the state.
You guys surprised there's not a big primary challenger for him?
I think there's as big a primary challenger as an incumbent usually has. I mean, he's someone who's well-funded, self-funded, and has another big-name consultant on his team. So I think he'll have to take that primary seriously.
And that's a serious primary. He definitely will have to take it as such.
Well, I just think he'll win it.
I was saying that at some point there were talks of like Mark Meadows or someone like that running against him and primarying him if he didn't toe the party line, some would say, in D.C. And I think he came out in support of a few of the president's measures in the last few months that I think tamp down some of those primary challengers.
Which will help him in the primary, but might hurt him in the general.
Which is always the case here. All right, more Flashpoint after this.